Welcome. This is our third episode of the Walkers, Winners, Goal Getters podcast. And we are so excited to welcome our guest today. A little bit of an introduction. My name is Katrina Walker. I am the executive director for Walker's Winners, which is a nonprofit I co founded with my son, Jordan Walker, who is a Cardinals outfielder. Walker's Winners is a nonprofit youth development program that is missioned to promote academic achievement and holistic development and personal empowerment for young people, so ages kindergarten through 12th grade. And so part of that mission means that we want them to envision amazing futures for themselves. And a lot of times that means putting in their sights people who've done impressive things, people who've set goals and who have met those goals. And not just any goals, but stretch goals, goals that feel big and ambitious. And so the idea is to go from being a goal setter to a goal getter and have those goals be stretch goals that allow you to achieve that. And the guest that we have today is a perfect example of that. We have David Lanum, who is a young man who has done impressive things. And in particular, he'll be talking to us about how he came to be a Delta pilot at the young age of 26. And so it is an impressive accomplishment, and particularly for one who is his age. So I'm just really appreciative to have you with us today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am so happy to be here. Ready for
Fantastic. That's great.
it.
All right, so I started by saying that this is for youth, for children and for youth. And so we'd like to start with where they might see themselves on their own journey and what it looks like on your journey. So we know that they're in school, and so I'm curious about how you felt about school as a kid. Did you like it? What things did you enjoy about it? What made it less fun, more fun? Lots of questions in there. You can kind of choose where you want to start.
So, as a kid, I mean, there was just a lot of aspects of school that I did like, being able to hang out with, say, my friends, get to know people who I still know now, um, especially like things like recess. As a like say elementary school student, that was something that of course I loved PE. Those are things that, at the time I really, really enjoyed. Um, but I mean, being able to be around like, those friends who I still have now, was one of the things that I liked the most. I did start to really, really like geography too as a student. It was like, since I'm such a visual learner, like I like to see things, that's how I learn. And that was like one of the things that now I still use. And it was probably my favorite thing, as a young student going through school. So that was probably my favorite thing. But yeah, as far as aspects of school, it was just being around other people, being around other kids who, I still know now.
I'm impressed that you are still friends with people that you went to school with in elementary school.
hmm
All right, so you all stay in touch. How have you been able to maintain those relationships?
It's been tough. There's been breaks in communication, but there are still a few who, we reach out, we talk to each other once every few months, sometimes it's longer than that, but it is fantastic to be able to see how everybody's doing.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I think the time that you spend with them and things like recess and PE and forming relationships where you're even making the effort years later to stay connected to them, I think it just highlights how important the people are in the places that we are, and so just nurturing those relationships. So you talked about being a visual learner. You talked about geography. Um, I'm wondering then, did you have a sense of place from that? Like, how were you going about learning geography? What were you doing with it when you were in school?
Well, it was just like being able to learn more about different places, see pictures of places, and I was just like, wow, like I wonder like where this is. I want to be able to go there at some point, and being able
Hmm.
to see it, visually was one of the things that really stuck with me.
That's great. All right, so talking about teaching experience, so you liked geography, you learned that you were a visual learner. Are there things that you liked less when you were in school that excited you less than geography?
Math. Yeah, math was always tough for me. I mean, I always saw it as a like a kind of a challenge, but it was definitely, I never looked forward necessarily to going to math class. But whenever I was in the actual class itself or taking a test, I wanted to be able to do like just as good as, say, my friends or other people in the class. So that was like always a challenge for me. It's like once I'm in the class, I felt like, okay, I want to like do the best on this test, out of everybody.
Okay. Sometimes people find that if they're comparing themselves to others, that kind of competition can make learning like less pleasant. How were you able to have that be a positive thing that fed you as opposed to something that turned negative?
It was more so like, okay, I wanted to be able to do well for my parents,
Hmm.
especially as a kid. It's like I
Hmm.
wanted to bring home the good grades.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Hmm.
sense of connection to other people. Um, Going from there, we know that you eventually discovered an interest in flying or flight. Can you kind of talk about what led you to that interest?
So I started showing interest in planes when I was around 2 years old. So I would sit in the driveway and look up and point at the planes. And, my mom, she's told me, I would say plane, mama, plane. And they redid my bedroom when I was 4, and they put all these stickers on the wall that were planes and clouds and like pictures of airplanes. So, my family and grandparents and everything started buying me like all these like little toys and plane like little models of airplanes. So fast forward to about 2012, um, I did my first discovery flight in a small two-seater airplane, and that's when I really knew I was like, this is what I want to do. That's just kind of what really kick-started it all. I was like, I can see myself doing this.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we fast forwarded through a lot to go from planes on our walls to in a two-seater, and I want to step through those in a little bit more detail. But a couple of things that I really like about the first part of what you said is the way your parents were responsive to your interest. They heard you say plane and they nurtured that interest. Your family bought you planes, decorated your room, surrounded you with the things that you showed interest in and that you aspired to. And I think that's a good reminder for us as parents to be listening to the things that our kids show interest in and to nurture that and to surround them with the possibility of that. Um,
Absolutely. It was like
yeah.
something, especially from being really young until that point where I did that flight, it was like something that I didn't really know anything about, but like stayed interested in. It like always fascinated me. As being younger, I never really had time to really get into it until that point where I took that flight, but it was something that I knew I wanted to explore, when I
Hmm.
was younger, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so 2012, how old would you have been?
Let's see. Yeah, I would have been about 13, 14 years old.
Okay, so at 13 years old, you're in a two-seater Discovery flight. So how does it even happen? And kind of take us to that moment.
So my mom, so she actually started following pages on Facebook that, had to do with flight school, and taking flights. So they took me out to, there's an airport out by, I don't know if you're familiar with the Six Flags area over
Mm-hmm.
there down I-20. Yeah, so it was right next to the Six Flags. It's called Brown Field.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out there, and here's a program that I'll tell you a little bit about in a few minutes, who actually gave me a discovery flight. So, they flew around, just kind of did some sightseeing around the airport,
Mm-hmm.
and then, came in to land. They actually let me fly for a couple of minutes once we were up at altitude. And I was like, okay, this is the coolest thing I've ever done.
Wow. So again, building on what we had said before, not only did they put planes up, give you toy models, but found a way for you to experience flight. And
Hmm.
so when you say Brown Field, Charlie Brown Airport, then this is part of the Charlie Brown Airport down in that area.
Hmm.
So that feels like a nice segue to the program that allows 13-year-olds to get in a plane to see the world from up above and even to fly the plane for a little bit. Tell me about a program that lets kids do that.
So there's a program that I was in called ACE. It stands for Aviation Career Enrichment, and has been around now since 1980, and was started by a guy named Julius Alexander. Um, he actually started ACE due to the fact that he faced so much discrimination in the 60s while attempting to become a pilot. So instead, he started teaching, and started teaching kids how to fly. So when he got started, and until the time that he stopped, he trained over 200 pilots through their solos, and now there's hundreds who he either trained or knew or taught, um, that are FOs and captains now at big airlines like Delta, United, American, and even in the military. So it's more of a weekend thing. It's like Saturdays, they have a ground school in the morning, and then afterwards, you go fly. You do a lesson with an instructor. And that was where like I really got started with flying, and especially it being a weekend thing. When I was in school, I was always playing, a sport like either baseball or football. So throughout the week, I would be doing things like that. And then on the weekend, that's when I was able to go and be a part of ACE, and keep the dream of flying alive, just because it was things were so busy throughout the middle school and early years, that it was like that was just the perfect time and way to be able to keep myself focused and interested in things.
Okay. There are a couple of things that I want to follow up from what you said. First, you talked about keeping the dream of flying alive. And so to start with Mr. Julius Alexander, who, and I'm not sure, given the discrimination he faced, how far he was able to get with his own flight dreams. Do you have a sense of how far he was able to go?
Yeah, so he was able to get up to flight instructor status, but he was never given the opportunity to actually be able to fly in the airlines,
Hmm.
just because at the time it was just, it was too, there was just too much.
Right.
So,
There were no black pilots allowed to, given the opportunity to fly for a big airline, even though they had the qualifications.
mhm.
So when you talk about keeping a dream alive, like to have worked hard and to prove your prowess and not be given an opportunity to put it to use, that could make people bitter and choose to just kind of walk away from the dream. But
It did.
instead, he decided to instill that dream in the next generation, where he said, if I
Absolutely.
can't fly, I can make sure that there are hundreds. You say there were over 200 pilots that he trained. You know, that there are hundreds of pilots who will fly. And so, you know, and not only fly, be a first officer, and then you can kind of maybe tell us a little bit later on what it means to be a first officer versus a captain. But that is one way to deal with personal disappointment is to find a way to, you know, feed and nurture the possibility in others so that it doesn't die, it continues. Um, that that is impressive. And I think the other thing is you were saying that you were always playing a sport, baseball or football, and so it seems like there would have come a time where you would have to make a choice because even if you're devoting your weekdays to sports, you know, there are games on weekends. Um, did there come a point where you had to decide whether you were going to devote yourself to flying or, you know, keep with sports, and how did you manage that?
Well, especially with Ace, since it was over the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that at the time I was definitely more devoted to say, sports and being a part of a team. But with Ace, it was a great thing because I was able to do it when I had the time. I mean, I knew for a fact that there would be a day where I would, be full. It would just be, gas, full gas going straight toward, flying. But at the time, being a kid, I was just, I enjoyed playing sports and being a part of a team. And I knew at some point in the future, I would be chasing that goal just full force.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they left space for you to pursue a number of interests and actually not have to choose so early.
It did.
Um,
It kept my parents moving. We were
I bet.
always yeah.
Right. Right. So much had to happen by virtue of their willingness to sacrifice time and make ways for you to do both, for you to be involved in sports and also keep the dream of flying alive.
Mhm.
Was there
Absolutely.
ever a point, because that sounds like a pretty busy schedule for a young person in middle school and high school, you are pursuing both baseball and so you stayed with baseball and football and flight school through high school?
hmm
Okay. So was there ever a point where like, oh, I'm too tired. I just I can't go. Like it's
There were days, especially in high school, like we had our football games on Friday nights.
mm-hmm,
So there were days where, I felt like I couldn't get up, to go early to the flight school. And I mean, there were some days where I didn't make it, but I never let that continue. I would make sure, okay, like if I don't go, today, I'll be there next weekend.
mm-hmm. So you never miss 2 weekends in a row, or you
No,
rarely miss 2 weekends in a row.
very rarely.
So what position did you play for football?
So in football, I was a wide receiver. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that.
So you have some speed. You can go out and get
Mhm.
it. Okay, yeah, Friday nights. And so there is like I can like Friday night lights for football. It's hard to
hmm
like trade that in for anything else. So you played football through high school.
hmm
Okay. So you would have football practice, have Friday night games, and what time did you have to be at Charlie Brown Airport for Ace?
9 a.m.
Okay. And you would leave the field at what time on Friday night?
Oh man, probably around 10, like 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Okay.
hmm
So home by 11 in bed, and then Charlie Brown Airport was what, like 30, 40 minutes from your house? So to be there by 9, you had to leave by 8, 8:15.
Yeah, so we were like out of the house by 8.
Okay. That's
hmm
what commitment looks like. All right, so you started at ACE at what age? And then can you just kind of walk us through what the different stages of that was like as you continued to go on the weekends?
hmm So I started when I was 14, and throughout the time that I was at ACE, um, I started flying, right after the ground school. And me and my instructor, he really started to kind of like instill the very basics of flying into me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I really started to learn, like, especially with the ground school, you would go through something in ground school, and then he was able to show me in the plane, like, where that was applying. So throughout the time, I kept going on the weekends, kept being a part of the flight training. And then there was a camp that they actually had there that was co-sponsored by Delta. And I was able to do that while I was 14. Um, and they took us to, like the big maintenance hangar at the airport. And it was where I met some of my mentors that I still have now. And took us to like museums and like had hands-on experience with different airplanes. And it's kind of wild, like looking back on it. It's like, man, it's been a long time, but like I still like talk to all these people. um but yeah, I had a to get into that camp, I had to do like an application, and they did like a little interview with me. And the interview was basically just to gauge how interested are we in actually pursuing this as like a career. And at the very end of the camp was a flight that they did that took us down to Florida to a museum. And it was done by an all black crew, which was something that, most of us had never seen before. So it was, being able to like connect with mentors that like I said, I still have now. I actually saw one a few days ago, while I was in the gym. But yeah, it was being able to connect with them and really keep it really built up the interest of all of us who are a part of it. It like really, kept building on our interest of flying. And now, then we now know somebody that is a part of like they're, a part of the industry.
Okay, let's go back to what it means to have a mentor and kind of how that relationship has worked for you, and any thoughts about, you know, people finding mentors and being able to connect with them. So, can you talk a little bit more about like your mentors and those kind of questions?
Mhm. So I met my first mentor. His name is Brandon. I met him when, like I said, I was 14. And especially like with my family, since we don't have any pilots in the family, um, he was kind of able to guide like me and my parents just through the steps and what we needed to do, down the road, especially. It was like with each step that I would move, we would have to ask him, those questions just to try to get an idea of like what I needed to do as far as, making this happen. And we eventually, like, he was able to help get me into a camp where we actually flew to our first solo. So
Mm-hmm.
that was like a smaller camp. At that point, I was 16. Um, and we were able to actually go fly, and they would send us up with instructors. And at the very end of the camp, we all did a solo flight. So we flew a flight around the pattern by ourselves. And I still remember that like it was yesterday. Um, but yeah, the having my mentor there, he was a volunteer in that camp. And, it was like more of a chance to connect with him and, get to learn more about flying and, his experience in it and what it takes to get to that next step. It's just I feel like especially with something like this, it's really important to have a mentor just because they're going to be able to guide you through everything and you get to kind of see like what the next step is before like it keeps you kind of a step ahead.
Hmm. So that seems like a critical piece, right? You've said that it is. How would you even? I would imagine that more than Brandon was there at the camp. Like, how did you connect with him such that he became your mentor? Like, what advice? So, first of all, I appreciate how you framed it by saying, "Hey, my parents and we didn't know anybody who was an actual pilot, and it made it all the more important for us then to find someone who could help us know what the steps were and to guide us through it." And so, okay, now I want a mentor. Like, how do I find that kind of person, and what are my responsibilities for nurturing that kind of relationship?
Well, especially when I was younger, like once we met him, I really looked up to him, and I was always asking him questions, and he could really see that, this kid really wants to do this, and at the time when I met him, he was about the age that I am now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so it was, somebody who's younger, who's a part of it. And I could I feel like, relate to him in a way, just
Mm-hmm.
because he had gone through what I was going through already. Um, so I was always asking him questions, always asking, what are the airlines like? Because at the time he was flying for a regional airline. And it's just like, man, I want to be exactly what he is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he could see that. So that's like kind of what kept that alive through all this time. So, we still talk through like every single step that I've taken until now. He's always been there.
And so, what does he do now? Where is he?
He's at Delta also.
Mm, that's wonderful. All right, so you say it's really simple. Like, just be actually interested in the thing that you want to do, and ask
It's
questions, and be eager. Like you said, you looked up to him, which means you were watching him, right? You were paying attention to what he was doing. There were things you asked, but there were also things that you noticed, and you, I imagine, then tried to incorporate that into what you do. And so that seems to be, like a baseline part of being
absolutely.
a mentee.
Yeah, and it's just, I feel like it really motivated them in a way to help us just because, seeing that, they love what they do and they're like seeing us work so hard at it, I feel like it really, in a way, motivated them to, you know, keep doing what they were doing.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah, and that solo flight, I can only, first of all, I mean, I know you've wanted to be a pilot and to fly, so maybe you wouldn't be terrified, but the idea of being in a plane and you taking off and you landing was all you? Like, was
It's,
there a moment where you were nervous about that?
oh yeah. Like, I was like, it's more so like once like they shut like the door and you start the engine, you're like, okay, I got to do this now, and like there were kids who were, there were probably about 10 or 11 of us who were all they were all part of that same solo flight experience camp that I was in. And, they're all out there and, the mentors and the instructors are all out there. And you're just like, okay, everybody's watching me. Like I got,
I gotta do it
got to
right.
do this.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
but that those. seem to be like inflection points where you do. There has to be a moment where you just leave the nest and do that next thing that requires you to demonstrate that you can operate under this higher expectation, right? And there's
Okay.
also trust, right? Obviously,
Mhm.
they're not putting you in that plane unless they trusted that you knew you were capable, like that, trusted in your capability to manage it. And so, both giving people the chance to show that they independently can perform and don't need to be like, managed every step of the way. Because you were 16, you said, when you, there are people
Mhm.
who don't even know how to drive a car at 16, and you were flying you were flying a plane by yourself. And so that's a tremendous amount of trust that adults have in your capability, and the training, right, that you would have had to do to justify that trust. But we are perhaps often more capable of doing things that are hard than we acknowledge and give ourselves credit for. And when a 16-year-old can take a plane up in the sky and bring it back down, and everything, goes smoothly, that's a reminder.
Yeah, it was just like, yeah, that was I was nervous, but I mean it went really well. I just was like, I can't believe like I'm doing this right now.
Yeah. As a parent, I think I would have said this. I cannot believe my son is doing this. Are we sure that this is a good idea? So, yeah, I would have had pause, but a lot of pride that you were able to do it. And so after that, I would imagine that your confidence would have been just bring it on. I know that I'm capable.
Oh, absolutely. Hmm.
Okay. Well, we're 16. We're still in school. So uh, when you flew your solo flight, did you have your driver's license? Were you also driving?
I was.
Okay.
I had
So,
been practicing that with the learners,
hmm,
from the time I was 15 to 16.
okay.
And yeah, I was driving. Um, I drove myself down to the airport, where the camp was happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm sure your parents were not upset that you were able to drive yourself down to Charlie Brown. Like they're like, what? We now, we want to set people free to drive themselves.
Well, this specific airport where I did the solo, it was actually a different one. It's Peachtree City, way down there south of the airport.
Mm,
So
okay.
yeah, but yeah, yeah, it feels like it wasn't that long ago.
But it's 10 years ago. So a
Hmm.
decade ago, you were taking your first solo flight, and now you are a Delta pilot. All right, let's get out of high school, and then we'll take that path from high school. So you're still in high school. You are 16. Um, Kind of what is high school like for you? How does your dream of flying fit into what you're doing for high school? Because you're still playing football, you're still playing baseball. So you did that all 4 years of high school.
Hmm.
Okay. And you're also doing academics. How in the world are you making time for all of those things? Because you're playing sports for at least 2 seasons of the year. Fall, you have football, and then spring, you have baseball, and then you have flight school, and then you have classes. What is life like?
It's not easy. Um, especially when you have like all these, different assignments and things for school to keep up with. It's it really it's definitely it's testing for sure. Um, it was at the time, I was really, especially I was, prioritizing like doing well in school
Mm-hmm.
and, sports and everything. But it was something that I knew that, I wouldn't be doing forever, I guess, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, well, like, I'm in high school now, I'm doing sports, but it's like, I know at some point, this is going to be the things that, I really need to keep myself focused on. So I had like, books and things that involve flying that I would read. Um, and, that kind of kept me on it, I guess, if that makes sense. Just because with school and playing sports, it's just it's so much. It's, just like basically a full week. And then, on weekends, you have homework that you might have to have, done by Monday. So it's just, it was a lot of like kind of learning to like manage my time, and keep like, while also in free time, I was, like reading books about aviation. I had like a little flight simulator on my computer that I was playing. So that like kept me, that, was able, that helped me a lot.
Okay. Now, there's some people who, you clearly love football and baseball enough to play it all the way through high school. Was there any part of you that was tempted to try to do that professionally or at least in college?
No, mm-mm. It wasn't really my passion to say, I enjoyed it. I had fun. I just like, I wanted to have like that, school, like that high school experience. But like, it was like, I knew that flying was what I wanted to do, you know? It's like, I know that like, through high school, I'll do this, but I wanted to go to school, like, especially in college, to fly.
I like the precision of your vision, right? Like what you have said is like obviously you enjoyed football and baseball enough to remain committed to it throughout high school, and that's no small feat. But you were clear on what your passion was, while making time to nurture other parts of your life, right? You said, I wanted that
Mhm.
high school experience. So you had like a full, busy high school experience, but you were laser focused on, but my passion is flying. And so not everybody knows when they're 16 or 4 or 8 what that is, but taking the time to try to discover what it is so that you can move through life with a sense of purpose definitely makes it easy to prioritize. You talked about you prioritize doing well in school. You know, you wanted to be a pilot and go to flight school. Were there academic requirements for that, or you just did it for some other like reason, the desire to do well in school?
Well, I just, the desire to do well in school, really was what I was doing it for. I didn't, especially when I was, a freshman and, when I was like 14 and whatnot going into high school, I didn't really think much, I would say, about college the same way I was thinking about it when I was a senior, you know? So, what I did know though was like, okay, this matters. I wanted to be able to do well,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I was, 14, 15. It was just like, okay, like I want to be able to like do well because I know in the future this is going to be important, And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that was by, just hearing my parents say that, or, our teachers. They were, making sure like they were, kind of telling us like, hey, these are going to be some of the things that, you know, colleges are going to look at.
Mm-hmm. So, parents and teachers say that a lot, and students don't always hear it.
Mm-mm.
Um,
I didn't always hear it.
I appreciate that honesty. I appreciate that honesty. Did your friends like were they also serious about their or wanting to do well in school, or it just varied
It just
for?
varied.
Mm-hmm,
There was a few kids who, they did go on to play like college sports and things like that. So for them, it was like, it was totally different than it was for me. So I just kind of had like, there was a range. It was like every type of, person you can imagine. It was just like some people prioritize like school more, and then there were others that, you know, all that mattered was how well they did in the sport they were playing.
so sometimes people find it hard, like if their friends around them don't share like the same focus, that it's hard for them to stay with it. So you had some friends who were more focused on sports and cared less about school. You said that you didn't always hear the message of school is important. And I'm just thinking of that student who's like, oh yeah, maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't. Like, what would you say to them, if anything, or what would you share about how you made decisions about prioritizing school, given that sometimes people around you weren't, and sometimes you didn't always, kind of hear the message from teachers and parents?
I would say to them, it's just kind of like it's like about setting like a vision and following it. So, whatever they want to be, it's just like if that's say it could be anything. It could be, doctor, pilot. It's just like just I feel like when you kind of have like once that goal, like once that, fire kind of builds, it's just like I feel like that kind of motivates people in a way. So it's like I would definitely say, once you kind of have an idea in mind of like what you want to do, really just go full force into it. So even if it, even if there's people around you, say that, may not be on the same path as you, or, maybe they don't think school is so important. It's just about being your own person, you know. Always, of course, yes, aim to do well in school, but it's like just kind of be your own person so that way, you don't kind of like you don't fall off into, you know, you don't you don't become distracted is what I'll say. Because there's a lot of outside noise, and it's just there's there's going to be some people that always have just some completely different goal or outlook on things. So just, be your own person and absolutely just go for what you want to go for.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
total
try to stay
sense.
motivated. Don't just
And,
do
and
it for your parents or anything.
okay, let's pause on that part where, like, how do you, is there something about like that you had that you did to stay motivated? Because there were times clearly where you would be tired or it would be easy not to be motivated.
Well, a lot of that had to do with my mentors and ACE. Um, because I would enjoy, my sport that I was playing um on, say a Friday night. And then I would go to ACE or talk to one of my mentors, and it's just like, man, this is so much, this is for me for sure. It's just like, man, I can't wait to be able to do this.
Hmm. Okay, so create experiences that bring excitement and joy. Like, it
Absolutely.
sounds like it was like hands on. It was fun. You were learning. You were engaged. So the experience itself is part of what kept you motivated.
Yeah, especially for me being like a visual, hands-on type of a person. It's like I wanted to like be in that environment to where I could actually, fly the plane. I could, actually, because that really for me, it like kind of put like a vision in my head about like, okay, this is what this is going to look like, and I like this.
That
Like
makes sense.
just by reading like a book for me, it wouldn't have worked as much as being actually hands-on with things.
You say that, but then you said that, in so I get the hands-on, right? I don't deny. I think you're absolutely right, but I'm curious about your decision to also read books. Like, why was that important if you were having these great experiences on Saturday that were so much fun?
Well, that actually backs up, you know, what we had learned. So it was more so me trying to make more sense of something that maybe I had seen or heard. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go in here and, look at more of this. So that way, especially if I didn't fully understand something, I wanted to be able to like go in with questions that, my instructors could either show me or clear up for me. And it was more so too about just remembering the things that I had already seen or learned. I never wanted to like go in there and like, having forgotten something that we had done like a week ago. So it's like, okay, I remember we did this and I remember what this was like. And now, like, seeing it here, I can just kind of remember or like clear up something that maybe I had seen or heard.
Okay. So it allow you to deepen your knowledge,
Mhm.
and to like lock it in too. Did they tell you to read, or was that something that you did on your own?
They encouraged it, which, and I didn't always do it for sure, but like, um, a lot of it was, I did it on my own. A lot of it I did on my own.
And that's the curiosity.
I was just, yeah, exactly. I was so curious. I was like, okay, like this is so, what we did was so cool. I want to like, read up more on this.
That's great. All right. Well, I know we've been in high school for a minute, and I want to at least get us to being a Delta pilot. So, talk to us. You graduate from high school, and then you go to flight school. Can you just kind of give us a quick run through of what that means, what you're doing in flight school?
Absolutely. So in flight school, you have both ground lessons and flight lessons. And this was more around like the early, going through college portion of my life. So it was at least, I think it was, what was it? It was, yeah, it was 4 meetings a week, outside of like our regular classes and stuff that we had to do. So it was like 4 meetings a week out at the flight school with our flight instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do like a ground lesson and then we would go fly. And once I got to college, it was all about like just, it was that's when it really shifted to just like, okay, like you're now training to be a pilot. So that was like the biggest thing for us is like how well we did in like our flight classes on campus and then like how well we did with like our flight instructor and things like that. So there's like several levels to flight school. And each semester we would go through what they call a rating or a license. So when I got to flight school in Tennessee, I already had what's called your private pilot license. So that's like the first license that you'll ever do. That's where you, like, for example, you go through your solo, and then, once you get done with that, then you can kind of continue building. So after that, then you go through what's called your instrument. So that teaches you how to fly in clouds and, when you can't
Mm,
see anything outside.
mm, mm.
And then you do commercial, which is a little bit more involved with what you learned in private and instrument. And then you go through what's called your multi. So you fly a plane that has more than one engine and what to do if one of the engines stops. Yeah, so we were actually shutting down the engine in flight.
Mm, mm,
Hmm. Yeah,
mm.
so that was that was always something. But yeah, through flight school you do all of that. And at the end of each training course, you take what's called a check ride. So you go fly with someone who's approved to, like, what they'll do is they'll ask you questions on the ground. They'll basically like test you on the ground and then they'll test you in the air. So they'll say, okay, show me this, or demonstrate that. And like you do it exactly the way that you've done with your flight instructor just on your regular flights. And after that, then they will give you your next certificate. So that was always like just the best feeling ever, like passing another rating, and it's like knowing that you're that much closer to getting to, an airline down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, flight school it was a lot. It was hard, but I mean, every single bit of it was worth it. Every single bit of it was definitely worth it. And,
Mm-hmm.
now a lot of the people that I knew in flight school, a lot of them are flying for either, Delta also or United or some, the other big airlines. And a lot of my flight instructors and friends I still know.
Mm. Okay, so my next question, because I think people are used to the traditional of what it takes to get into college. So after high school, rather than going to a traditional college, you went to flight school. What's required to get into flight school?
So I did go to like a traditional college, but they just also happen to have a flight school. And there's like several of those that do, like, they have one at, where I went in Tennessee, and they've got one at, Auburn and Ohio State and places like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's if you go to, there's different colleges out there that I know like are completely just all about that, but like
Mm-hmm.
traditional colleges do offer it. So it's just, just basically another major that's on their list that they have.
So what school in Tennessee did you go to?
I went to a school called Middle Tennessee State University.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my
Nice.
mentors was trying to get me to go to North Dakota, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I
I
was
want to
like,
fly. We're
I
gonna
was
find a
like,
place that's not North
it's
Dakota.
too cold. Yeah. I don't know. This is not for me, man.
Why did they want you to go to North Dakota?
Because that's where he went.
Hmm. Okay, that is a reason.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, no, I'm gonna stay like somewhere closer to home.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, like, that's also an important point about mentors give you advice, not all of which is a
Yeah.
fit for you. But the point, like, you have to kind of know this I'm taking, this I'm leaving.
Hmm.
But at least you've been introduced to it. You said flight school was hard. What was hard about it, and how did you make it through?
Well, the hardest thing I would say was just usually all the pressure that I was putting on myself, especially to do well. It's like, of course, the flight lessons and the tests throughout the rating were hard, but it was more so like in my head, just trying to like convince myself, okay, it's like I can do this, you know? Just because I mean, it was like, especially at that point, it's just like you feel so much pressure to do well. It's like, man, if I don't do, perfect on everything, I'm not going to make it type of thing. So it was more so just, you know, me believing in myself. I would say that was one of the harder things for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And just because it was something that was, kind of new for me, no one in my family had ever done, anything to do with flight school or flying. So it was, just kind of me just trying to, figure this all out. And I felt like I wanted to do, really, really well, or else, the airlines may not call me, even though it was just, it was all in my head. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's just, taking one day at a time and just, always focusing on the next flight or the next lesson.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that was probably the hardest thing. But as far as each rating goes, it would definitely be the check rides. Those were
Mm-hmm.
definitely hard. And of course, they were stressful for everybody, but we all made it through. It's just
Mm-hmm.
study and do as well as you can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I hear like you saying that you wanted to do very well, like I'm thinking of like this pressure to be perfect. Is that would that be an accurate statement that at times you felt like a pressure to be perfect?
That's me.
Um,
I am I'm kind of in a way like a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if I mess something up, it's like, oh man, like I would kind of like beat myself up over it. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's a mistake. Everybody makes them. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's that was just something that, especially for me, I kind of had to learn as I got older
Mm-hmm.
that, it's just a mistake. Don't let it, you know, sit on your head or anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I would think that with all that you accomplished at a young age, that the you believing in yourself would just kind of naturally follow. What say why that was something you also had to work through?
It was, I don't, a lot of it, I think, stemmed from just like me wanting to be, impressive.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, I always, like for me, it's like, okay, like I always did believe in myself, but there were times where it was like I just had to kind of, I kind of had to, it's for me, it's like, okay, it's like, you're not going to be perfect no matter what happens. So it's just, just put your best foot forward and that's what's going to get you through it.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And I like,
oh, go ahead.
no, no, I wanted you to finish your thought.
No, it's like, and as you accomplish that next step, it's like, then you really start to see it's like, okay, well, I've done this, now I've done that. And with each step, you just become more and more confident, and your end goal gets that much closer. And you're like, okay, I'm, doing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that coupled with what you said about taking one day at a time and focusing on the next training, that sometimes what gets people stuck is the bigness of it. I have to be perfect, like in the completion all together. But if it's instead, I just need to do my best in this next step and work really hard to be prepared. Like, not just do my best and just, wing it, but I've prepared, I've studied, I've done everything I'm supposed to do with diligence. And now I'm just going to trust in the process, taking it step by step and not trying to get too far ahead of myself or making it too big. And that seemed to be, from what you're saying, what allowed you to kind of make it through and trust that, you were, a highly capable student, and, that would come out in what you were doing step by step.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Okay.
That's absolutely it.
That's awesome. So I know, we've talked a little bit before. I feel like, you talked about there being different levels each year of what you do, that you've had a chance to do some flight instruction yourself. Can you kind of talk to us about all the cool things that you got a chance to do while you were working your way through flight school?
Oh, absolutely. So while I was in college, after I did my multi rating, I went for flight instructor. And like a lot of us did that just because to fly for your first airline, there's, a certain number of hours that you have to have before you can apply. So a way to do that for a lot of us was flight instructing, including me. So it can be a lot. Like the training is definitely pretty rigorous for flight instructing, and for good reason, just because you're literally teaching somebody else how to fly.
Yeah.
So um that I will say was probably when I really learned the most. Um Especially when I say got my instrument rating, it's like, man, I know this stuff now, but then it's when you're actually teaching somebody else to do it, then you're like, okay, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know when I was a student, that now I know because now I'm teaching it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I will say, probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my entire life, just because it's so much fun being able to show somebody else how to do. especially because with the students, I really saw kind of like my former self in them, and like they were wanting to work hard so they could also get, make it to their dreams. And, throughout time, I've, kept in touch with a lot of my students, and a lot of them are at the airlines now themselves. So that's like kind of wild to see, it's just like I,
Mm-hmm.
knew this person when they had not a single flight hour, and now they're flying at the same airline as me. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you really do learn a lot. It's just, especially with my students, I would, we would do our grounds and our flights and everything. And to make it like a fantastic experience for the students, like we would do our grounds at, restaurants and, places like that. So it was like, a lot of fun for them also. Um, and they really loved that, and then we were able to go fly, and I kind of built like the schedule around their classes that they were taking as well as like whatever I was taking at that time. So we were able to, we did a lot of our flying at night, and yeah, the students really they like that a lot just because there's not as many people out at night.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to go do a lot of, because I had a lot of students that were doing instrument,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that is like, you don't really need to see much of anything to train for that anyway. So like we did a lot of our stuff at night. Um, and then as time went forward, I became what they call the stage check instructor. So with each rating at the flight school, there would be like stages to it. So you'd go through like say stage one of your private, stage two, stage three, then you have an EOC, and then they send you to your check ride. So I would do a lot of those stage checks for students just to make sure that they were where they were supposed to be at that point in their training. And then the EOC, we formed it to where it would be harder than their actual check ride. So when we actually sent them into the check ride, they were ready for it.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, for you to be as young as you are, I feel like you've had a chance to really. I love the full circle of it. And I know when we've talked before too, you mentioned that a lot of your students will request you for that next licensing. So there's something that you're doing right, not only to become a stage check instructor, but also for you to be chosen again and again by your students.
Well, it was just for me, I just wanted to make it like just a fantastic experience for the students, just because I know it can be like a really stressful thing at times. And just kind of remembering how I felt as a student and some of the instructors I had, it's like I took the best from each instructor that I had and applied it with how I was teaching and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's why we would do, our grounds and things at, other locations, or if there was like, say like a restaurant that they wanted to go to, I'd be like, okay, well, we'll go get food and we can do our ground over there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a student that really, really enjoyed pool, and we had a pool table in the apartment that I was living in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So me and him would like do pool and do the ground. Hmm.
So there's so much about knowing your student, right? First,
Hmm.
knowing them enough to know he really like pool, and so we're gonna do. He really likes this restaurant, so we're gonna go there. And the idea of focusing on the student experience, right? I wanted it to be a fantastic experience for the student, and how you saw yourself in them, right? And so it was almost
Hmm.
like you were teaching the person that you were at that age and just kind of thinking through what it would be like for you and what kind of things you would want. So I hear also like relationships, which to me circles back from when you were talking about like what you loved about elementary school, like recess and being with your friends. Like so much of life is about relationships and being thoughtful about them and nurturing them and caring about the people, right? So it's not just the subject you were teaching. You're teaching people who have interests and who are, are going through this experience. And, so much too about it. Obviously, the nature of what you're teaching, it is hands on, right? You have to fly a plane, it's not theoretical. But just being intentional about the kind of experiences that help them build proficiency in that. And I think that's something that we as teachers can think about. How are we building, trying to build fantastic experiences and not entertaining experiences, right? I mean, it was
Hmm.
fun, but you said it was hard. I mean, you got to fly at night. It's not that fantastic translates into like flat and meaningless and like just there to like entertain. But
Hmm.
how are we creating those kinds of experiences that engage and excite and are meaningful?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to make it like just like a really meaningful and exciting experience for them. Just
Mm-hmm.
because, for me with some instructors, it wasn't always that way. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, well, like whenever I start teaching students to fly, I want to make it different than, say, this experience that I had. And then there were instructors that I had that were just like the best. And I was like, okay, I want to like take the best things from him and, take the best things from this other instructor and use it, with
Mm-hmm.
how I teach in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. All right, I know we've been talking for a while, so I'm gonna, kind of scoot us to where you are now. Before I do that, we've been saying he all the way through. Are there women who, you've instructed? Kind of what is the population of women who are seeking to be pilots?
There are, I would say that out of every, say, 10, there's maybe four.
Okay.
Um, so it's growing. There's a lot that I know at Delta now,
Mhm.
and I had like a couple of students that were girls and who are now at the airlines too. And it's
Mhm.
awesome to see them. I actually saw one a few weeks ago. So, I was talking to her in the terminal for a little bit, and yeah, it's great. It's just
Yeah.
great to see everybody reaching their dreams. So like, anyone can make it.
Right. Right. Definitely looking forward to seeing women pilots like on actual flights. I don't know that in the flights that I've taken that I've seen many women pilots
Yeah,
or
one of
any
the best
international.
captains I've ever flown with was a woman. She was one of the coolest captains I've ever had. She's at United, so I don't get to see her as often as, you know, I would like, but I mean, I've seen her in passing and it's always good to see her.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. All right, so you have now graduated from college slash flight school. Tell us about a quick kind of overview of graduation to now Delta pilot.
So first I went to like my first airline right after college that was called SkyWest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a regional airline, and that's usually where we all start. There's some that go into the military, but a lot of us and a lot of my friends went into airlines like SkyWest. There's another one out there called Endeavor that a lot of friends went to, but those are all. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're like the smaller planes that fit maybe about 80 people or so.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we all started. So right after that, I went into the training for that. And that was some tough training just because it's your first ever airline. But um, I mean, the time that I had there, it's just like I learned so much and I'll never forget because a lot of that was like my first, and it's like you never forget like the first time you ever see people boarding your plane and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is like this is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yes.
mhm.
Right.
You're
Solo
like,
to people boarding your plane.
yeah,
Mm,
because all your training is done in a simulator.
hmm.
So you're not actually, it's different. And then when you actually go to fly, it's like, okay, this is the real deal now. We're not in the sim anymore.
No. All right. So you went to a regional airline. You stayed there for how long? Then what next?
I stayed there for about 3 years, I would say. And then, made it to where I am now. And, because all the big airlines, they look at that experience and they're like, okay, like, you know, we're gonna, pick people that have, say a certain amount of experience from either an airline like this or the military. So after a few years of that, I went in to interview with Delta and got the job. And it's the with Delta, it was kind of an intimidating experience almost, just because I was the youngest person that was there. Um, so it's like, man, there's a lot of people here who have like a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was now I'm right there with everybody. And it has been a blast. Like Delta is so much, I love it. I could
Mm.
talk for hours about that.
I wish we had hours.
I'm telling you,
There might
there's
have
just
to be.
there's a lot. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. All right. So just out of respect for time, there are a couple things I want to follow up on. So we walk into an interview and we are intimidated, right? I'm interested in how you prepared for it. And then also, youngest one there, what qualifications do you think you brought that made you one of the pilots that Delta selected? So first, how did you prepare for the interview, and then kind of what about your makeup made you one that Delta selected?
So I would say the preparation for the interview honestly starts while you're at the regionals. Like, because I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions that they ask you in like an interview, say at Delta, like, tell me about a time when this happened. And a lot of that comes from your experience at, say an airline like SkyWest.
Mm-hmm.
So, you think back to a time when this maybe happened to you at SkyWest and you tell them that story. And there's a lot of people, including myself, there's like different like things out there that you can join. It's almost like I'm trying to think of how to phrase, but it's like a group basically, and like there's different ones, and they help prep you for the interview by kind of telling you different types of questions that they might ask, and it'll be like on like say a Zoom call, and they'll call you and they'll ask you questions that an airline like Delta might ask you in the interview. So it was, a way to kind of be able to put my stories and thoughts into the words that Delta would want to hear. Um, so, now I have people, there's a few, guys who I know and girls who are wanting to go into the airlines. And when they get to that point, I direct them to the same group that I was a part of, just so they can get practice answering questions that they might ask you in, say, a Delta interview. Um, and yeah, so like with Delta, a lot of what they in, United Americans, kind of the same thing. A lot of what they look for is what kind of person are you? So it's like, is this a person that like, we would want to fly with for 4 or 5 days in a row? So a lot of it is just about like they're also seeing what kind of personality you have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just that's what it's about, is like just kind of seeing what kind of experience do you bring, and what kind of person are you. And I really think that that's like kind of what really brought me over into being part of part of Delta.
Okay. And I think those are soft skills that you've been developing all the way through. I mean, we talk about recess when you were a kid. You liked being with people, right?
Hmm.
And so relationships and valuing people. You talk about the kind of relationships you had with your mentors and that you still stay in touch with them, right? It's not a transactional relationship. It's one based on respect. It's one based on, a desire to learn. And so those I think would translate well to, a person. Is it somebody that we would want to work with? Do they show a desire to learn? Do they care about the people around them? You talked about when you were a football player and a baseball player, that being a good teammate, right? You learn those skills by virtue of the things in life where you embrace it. Like if you're being a wide receiver, you're having to do reads. You have to have a good connection with your quarterback, right? That's nonverbal communication or that you've practiced so that you can be in sync with others. And so there's a lot that we learn by virtue of the activities that we're in, right? And we
Absolutely.
pursue them not because we're trying to get ready for a Delta interview, but we pursue them because they're interesting to us. But there's so many things we learn if we really lock into them. And so I feel like, what you've said is that the things that you've done, because you've done them with fidelity, you've done them with passion, they've prepared you to then do well because it's given you not only like hard skills, like the technical knowledge that you need, but the soft skills of how to, be disciplined, how to be determined, how to work through tough moments, how to work with people, right? All of those things are necessary in order to be successful in whatever field you're interested in being in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just, all the experience that you have through life all coming together, to, and, now you see yourself, living your dream. And it's just like, yeah, each step through life was like it meant something.
Right. Right. And we don't want to rush that because sometimes people feel like they need to specialize early. I want to be a pilot. That's all I'm going to do. Right. But instead you say, oh, but I also like football and, this
No, yeah,
experience
you,
I really like. I like baseball. This experience. School is important to me. So, like, and not rushing. You said earlier, day by day, right? I'm not like, I want to be a pilot and I've skipped over all these steps. Instead, I want to be a pilot. So, I'm going to actually take things day by day and slow it down and make the most of the moments. And so I think, valuing each step and making the most of each step is an important part of growth. And also the reflecting, right? Because you said that you looked back at the teachers you liked or the, way that you learned and you were constantly learning because you were continually reflecting. And so that also plays into the growth.
yeah. So, if you're in like even elementary school, middle school, high school, it's like one of the biggest things I would tell you is to enjoy it because it's only going to come once in your life. So it's like just enjoy it while you're there, you know, because you'll have plenty of time for everything that you want to do. So, like, just really enjoy and, cherish every experience and, just enjoy the journey, really. Because
I think
most of
that
the
is a
joy is in the journey.
yes. Yes. People, I think, get so caught up in the destination that they don't enjoy the journey. And I think we're used to, like, we need to move fast, we need to be efficient, we need to be quick, we need to get it done. And
Hmm.
so stepping back and valuing the journey, I think, is a great piece of advice. A great note.
Absolutely.
Hmm. I think, like I said, I think that's a great note to end on. But let me not say that. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you didn't get a chance to say or that you would like to leave with us before we close out?
Well, definitely. I would say, like, just, for everyone out there, it's like, even if you don't know what you want to do yet, I would say just find something that you really enjoy because, like, once you're doing something that you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. So it's like going to like work does not feel like going to work. Like, it's just like, well, going to, have another day doing what I love to do. So. It's
Yeah.
just, just find something that you enjoy and go after it.
Yeah. So follow your joy, go after your joy, pursue your joy, however you say it, but
Hmm.
find it and follow it,
Absolutely.
and that leads you to good places.
Absolutely.
This conversation has been such a joy, David. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me. I know you said that you came in to your home base and then you'll be leaving tomorrow, and so I
Back at
appreciate
it
you making
tomorrow.
time. That's right. But it's something that you love, and every time I talk to you, it is so clear how much joy and how much love you have for what you do, and so. I'm looking forward to being able to share with people some of the pictures of you kind of as a pilot so they can see how cool it is, the things that you do.
Absolutely. And if anyone has like specific questions, also feel free, I'll totally, you know, talk to them and help out any way I can.
Okay, that's great. We'll find a way to have a way for them to connect to you so that anybody who's interested knows that they can reach out.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for being so open and really sharing so much good information. It has been a pleasure talking with you.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate, you choosing me to talk to.
Yeah. Well, there you have so much to share. All right. Well, get rest and take care. Thank you.
All right. I will be looking forward to keeping at it and hearing how it's all going.
Okay. That sounds good.
All righty. We will talk later.
Okay.